This section is about finishing touches, and what I always do in the phase of finishing touches is that I always try to check the whole and complete image if there are any hot or dead pixels, and just make sure that you're cloning out those hot or dead pixels that you would see, especially when using long exposure photographs. You would always see some hot pixels. So first I would try to get rid of that, and that's easy to do by using the either the clone tool, or you could use this tool, which is called the spot healing brush tool. So that's something that I can demonstrate. What I always do as well is to add some grain, especially to my skies, because my skies are always very dark. And when you try to increase the contrast in your sky, or when you try to darken the sky in your images, and especially when using the gradient tool, it always tends to result in some banding. Well, there's a specific technical reason for that. I'm not sure what that technical reason is, but I'm not going into detail in that part. But you would always see that in most of your images, especially when you're having very dark skies. So I'm also trying to get rid of the banding just by using some noise. I can demonstrate that as well. And thirdly, I would also try to get rid of the halos in my images. Well, talking about halos, there's something specific that you need to know. It's not just a matter of just cloning away those white lines or, well, strange artifacts that you would see specifically on edges of buildings. For example, if you would look at this original color photograph of the New York City skyline, and you would look at the edge of the building. I hope you can see it, but you would always see, and even if you have a even if you have a much sharper and close-up shot of this building, if you would zoom in, just long enough for let's say, for example, 600%, 800%, then you would always see that the edges of a building are always a little bit blurry, and if you can see that here, you can see that also there, but there are more examples. For example, this building here. It's always blurry, even though the rest of the building is more focused and more sharp. And at the same time, for some reason, the edges of the building also tend to be a little bit darker than the rest of the building. You can see it very clearly over here in this specific example, but also here. You see that the edges are a little bit blurry and they tend to be darker. Same here, and well, it applies in let's say 90% of the situations. So you have to keep that in mind when you're trying to get rid of your halos in your black and white version, because most of the times people just bluntly try to get rid of the halos just by using the clone tool and removing the white lines around the building, around the edges of the building, and hence creating an effect as if the edges of the buildings are very sharp. And if you would look at it then, what you see then is something that almost looks copy and pasted on top of a background. It looks very unnatural. So you have to make sure that if you're getting rid of those halos, do it in a very clever way. And I would do it like this. So I'm going to a more advanced black and white version. So I'm going to add a few layers. So this is before and after. I'm going to be using this layer, so I'm not going to create a mask because I don't need a mask in this case. But for example, if I would look at this building, this section, or maybe I could use this one, the one with the dark edge over here. So you see the halo over here. So I would get rid of the halo in a very easy way just by using the clone tool, something like this. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to, well, in most cases you have to decide for yourself, is that part where you see the halo, is that going to be part of the building itself or part of the sky? Well, most of the times, if you would look at the original color photograph, so if you would look at this specific area, then it's hard to make up if this is part of the building or part of the sky. It depends a little bit. Sometimes I would say, okay, now it's going to be part of the building because it's blurry, it's darker, so it's impossible to tell for 100% for sure if this is going to be part of the building or of the sky. So you have to make your decision yourself. Well, in this case, I think I'm going to make it part of the sky. I think it's easier to do that. So I'm going to make that halo over there a part of the sky. Hold on a minute, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm referring to this specific part over here. I'm going to make this part of the sky. Before, after, okay. So I'm just using the clone tool. Make it a little bit smaller, the brush size, the clone size, something like 2. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. So just click on a spot in the air, in the sky, and just use something like this, for example. Okay, something like this, for example. Okay, but maybe it's a little bit too much, okay, but it's just for the sake of demonstration. Make sure that the edges of the buildings aren't too sharp. So it should always be a little bit blurry, just like in the original color photograph. It should be a little bit blurry, and at the same time it should be a little bit dark. So what I always do, in that case, you just use well, in this case, the burn tool. I'm going to decrease the size a little bit to 4 or 5. In this case, I'm going to use the highlight range and exposure of, well, in this case, I'm going to use 23. And just burn that specific edge, just to make it look more natural, and to avoid the idea that you have just copied and pasted a building on top of another background image. So this is what I would always do, and for every building that you see in this photograph. And this is something that I can also recommend you to doing that. Okay, so this is one of the well, finishing touches that I do, making sure that you get rid of the halos and make sure that you do it in a very natural looking way. The other finishing touch that I do is also getting rid of any hot pixels that you would see in your image. Well, I've already checked this one, and there are not that many hot pixels in this version anymore, but it's just a matter of making sure that you don't see any strange white, hot, bright spots, or whatever you call them, and then just use this spot healing brush tool. It's very easy. So whenever you see something like that, for example, if this would be a hot pixel or there, just click on there, and you're done. So it's some manual labor, but it's the most effective way of doing it. And most of the times you won't be seeing that many hot pixels in your image. So that's number 2. Number 3 is to always add some. Well, in my case, I would always add some grain to the sky, just to make sure that you won't see any banding anymore. Well, in this case, I didn't have a lot of banding, so but still, I'm going to use a little bit of grain, because you never know what's going to happen, especially when you try to print that image or whatever. If you look at it on a different computer monitor, you don't want to you don't want to have all those banding in the sky, because it just looks quite awful. So a very good way to get rid of that is just by using some noise, and it's very easy to do that. Just go to your, because I don't want to affect the buildings, I only want to affect the sky, because you never see any banding in the buildings. Of course, it's always in those uniform looking skies, especially when the skies are very blue, then you tend to get a lot of banding. So I only want to affect the sky, so that's why I'm going to my background image there. I'm going to add some noise, just very simple. You go to filter, then go to noise, add noise. Well, I'm going to move it over there. Most of the times, well, I'm quite happy with using just minimal amount of noise, and I think I'm going to use something. You have to zoom in a little bit just to make sure you don't add too much noise, but sometimes my experience is that if I use an amount of 2.5%, sometimes 3%, that would suffice already to get rid of the noise. So don't use too much noise, because then it looks, well, it looks too grainy and it's something that you don't want. And I always select this one as well, and because that works best for me. And so something around 2.5%, and that would be enough noise to get rid of the banding in your sky quite effectively. You could even try and use less noise, something like 1.5%. Most of the cases that would already work, but I like the specific look in my sky, so I'm using a little bit more noise than is necessary to get rid of the banding. Okay, then of course you only need to apply it to the sky, so you just go to your active layer, add a mask, load the sky selection again. So, and because the noise has been applied to my background layer, I only need to use the linear gradient tool, this one. So now the noise has been added to my sky only, and not to my buildings or to the water areas. Just zoom in a little bit, and most of the times, if you would have any banding up to this point, you would get effectively rid of those banding just by using some noise in your image. So to summarize, finishing touches, try to get rid of any banding that you have in your image just by adding just a little bit of noise. Just 1%, 1.5% would be enough. Try to get rid of all the dead or hot pixels that you see in your image. Well, that's very easy by using the spot healing brush tool. And more importantly, get rid of all those halos that you see. You would always see it in most of your images, because of it has to do with some lens diffraction, and if you convert it to black and white from the original color image, then the parts on the edges of the building will be translated in a little bit different way than you would have expected it to be converted. So it would result in some white lines or halos. So try to get rid of those halos, but do it in a very smart way, not just by bluntly using the clone tool, but make sure that the edges are still looking a little bit blurry and a little bit darker than the rest of the image of the building. So you make sure that the buildings don't look as if they are copy and paste on top of another background image.